FPL Game Week 22 final decisions. We're going to be having a look at some of the hot topics, injury news, injury updates, players that I think you should be buying into your team. Finally, FPL is back today. It's been a long time coming, so final decisions both for my team and what I recommend you doing going into Game Week 22. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 1,000 likes on the video's DM. Subscribe if you are new around here. It is great to have FPL back. Today is the day. Game Week 22 deadline is this evening. So today we're going to be having a look at some of those final decisions I know you are making and that I am making going into this game week as well. Where else, well, better to start than talking about Manchester City. First of all, we're going to talk about Erling Haaland. There is a press conference today for Pep Guardiola and Manchester City where we hope to have an update, particularly on Erling Haaland and also maybe on Kevin De Bruyne's fitness and how ready he is to start, and maybe any, leaks or early news that Pep might want to give us. Unlikely, but maybe we can hope. Erling Haaland, I do not think is going to be available to start the Burnley at home game, but of course, let's wait and see from that press conference. We have heard from Pep recently that it has actually been a fracture in Haaland's foot that has kept him out for almost 6 weeks, maybe even more now since the last time he played against Aston Villa. That being the case, he then said, we hope to have him back against Burnley where he can play some minutes, his first minutes. That for me implies that him playing his first minutes, he's been very cautious with injury returns in the past with the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, as we've seen recently. So I do think the best we're going to get is Erling Haaland on the bench. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be thinking about buying him. It does mean that even if you're making other transfers in your team, like I am potentially considering selling Mo Salah this week, I need to make sure that the Salah transfer I buy, the replacement I buy for Mo Salah this week, leaves me enough money to buy Erling Haaland. Whether it's this week or whether it's next week, you've got to be planning that Erling Haaland is very close to coming back. And the other one we've got is Kevin De Bruyne. Now, of course, there's been mixed reports. Pep's been saying for a while that he feels that Kevin De Bruyne is going to be available. He's ready to start. But then he's also said he is available to start. Whether that happens sooner or later, we'll wait and see. Do I think he's going to start Burnley? Probably, but I'm not more than 60% sure on that game. Is he going to be available to start Burnley and then Brentford just about 4 days later? I'm less sure of him starting both of the next two, so do proceed with caution. If you like a bit of risk, you think De Bruyne can do well off the bench, then great. But if you're buying De Bruyne, presuming he starts every single game from now on, I think you're selling yourself a lie a little bit. Can he do well off the bench? Absolutely. Is him being benched the odd game the end of the world? Absolutely not. But I do think he will not start every game between now and game week 26, so just bear that in mind. Next up is a bit of late injury news. So the first up is Gabriel, very highly owned, did very well going into game week 21, of course, with that massive 17-pointer, but he did come off against Crystal Palace. Arteta has said he will face a late fitness test ahead of the away trip against Nottingham Forest. He wasn't pictured in the Arsenal training photos on Sunday afternoon, but that doesn't necessarily always mean anything because there are several players missing who we know are definitely fit and available for this game. Personally, I do think Gabriel is going to be available. I have him in my team and hope that he's going to be back, but there will be a late fitness test. Do reminder, it is the first game of the game week, so we might get a little bit of early news going into the deadline on the deadline stream. Maybe we see some leaks or something like that, but he will face a late fitness test. Next up is Kieran Trippier, who went off late in the FA Cup game away at Fulham with a bit of a recurring groin injury, which you might remember did rule him out of game week 20 a few weeks ago. Eddie Howe has said that he's had this problem. It is something that he's continuing, but he should be fine. There will be late checks done in the build-up to game week 22, which Eddie Howe always mentions. He's never fully, open about his injury news, but it is positive around Kieran Trippier. And then finally is when are we expecting Mo Salah to be back? So, of course, Egypt have now been knocked out of the African Cup of Nations. So, the only thing stopping Salah being back is his fitness and is his injury. Now, again, Liverpool will have a press conference on Tuesday before the deadline. So, we might get an update from Jurgen Klopp if he's progressing well or maybe he's progressing badly. At the moment, we are expecting him still to be out. He might just about make game week 24, but game week 25 is what we're really predicting for Mo Salah. So with that in mind, who are the top players to buy buy position. We're not going to massively spend time on a lot of them, but these are the top 5 ranking depending on what position you are looking to buy. If you're going in goal, I do think Ederson is the best short-term keeper. Of course, doubles in game week 25, plays in game week 26, but is likely to blank in game week 29. If you are not playing your free hit that week, it's something to consider. If you are not playing your free hit in game week 29, Leno could be someone to go and buy. Great short-term fixtures, plays in game week 26 and is guaranteed to play in game week 29. Dubravka, of course, Newcastle not signing a keeper. The long-term fixtures for Newcastle are really nice, followed by Areola. These two are my favourite two. They rotate really well between now and the end of the season. And finally, it is Flecken. Of course, Brentford doubling game week 25, guaranteed to play in game week 26, and are guaranteed already to play in game week 29 as well. So playing the number of fixtures, although Brentford have been pretty poor defensively, just the number of fixtures they do have could make him an okay pick. Moving into defence, Estupiñán remains my number 1 pick, and if I end up buying a defender this week, I'm pretty sure it would be Estupiñán. He has the attacking threat, he has the clean sheet potential and the fixtures. Kyle Walker is next. Of course, Manchester City do have the double in game week 25, plus guaranteed to play in game week 26, which does make him appealing, but I'm not certain on the explosivity we get with him. It kind of feels like 2 or 6 that you're going to get with Kyle Walker, and I'm not necessarily sure it's time to be going and buying him. I prefer Estupiñán. Next up is Trent. Trent is lower down just based off these short-term fixtures against Chelsea and Arsenal in the next 2 games, but very explosive, plus predicted to have a double in game week 25 at the moment. Pedro Porro is next. Great attacking threat, great long-term fixtures. The only downside of Porro is, of course, Maddison being back, which might take some set pieces off him, but of course he does blank in game week 26. But they do have a fixture guaranteed in game week 29, and he's great going forward as well. And finally is a cheap option. The cheaper option to Estupiñán is Van Heck at Brighton. If you're looking for a cheap defender at the moment, the fixtures are great. They're keeping some clean sheets now as well. He would be the one that I would go with. Moving into midfield, the top 3 are all Manchester City assets. Foden, for me, remains the number 1 Manchester City player to buy at the moment over Kevin De Bruyne, no matter the money. The money might seem fine at the moment, but it won't be at some point. I like Bernardo Silva. I do like him as a bit of a cheap option. He just ticks along nicely in that Manchester City team. Pascal Gross comes next, just the long-term fixtures. Again, he didn't return in game week 21, but he remains a good player to buy. And finally is Richarlison. Richarlison will be higher up, but of course that blank in game week 26, you should probably take a rain check about what it means for your team. If you're able to buy another player that blanks in game week 26, then maybe Richarlison will be higher. But if you already own a lot of the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs and Luton, forgot who they were for a minute, then maybe buying Richarlison's not the best idea. Up front, similar to why I'd buy Flecken, is Ivan Toney, playing the number of fixtures, guaranteed to play in both blanks. Darwin, his form looks great, and even when Salah comes back, feels nailed to start almost every game. João Pedro and Jimenez are great cheap options. Jimenez is guaranteed to play in both blanks, whereas João Pedro is not, but the fixtures for João Pedro and the form is definitely better. And number 5, just given the fixtures, Ollie Watkins is still a decent option, but I don't feel like we're going down the list enough of us not making transfers to buy Watkins at the moment. Of course, if Erling Haaland is declared fit and available to start, he would go straight to number 1 spot. Next up are the top questions of the week. First of all, what is the best chip strategy? So I know it's a little bit of a plug, but tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, there will be a full video from myself on chip strategy, doubles, blanks, and everything like that. It will be at the beginning of game week 23 when we can't really talk too much about 23, so that will be there. My current favourite strategy will be triple captain in game week 25, either on Salah or on Erling Haaland. Free hit in game week 29, so I can forget the big blank. I can still plan my team. Wildcard in game week 34 and bench boost in game week 37. That is my current plan, but we'll talk a lot more detail about blanks, doubles, chip strategy in that video tomorrow. Best captaincy for this week is getting a lot of questions. Should we pick a differential captain? Basically this week, whoever you captain is going to be a differential. The Manchester City guys will end up with more captaincy than most people. At the moment, I've got Alvarez 1, but this could change depending on Haaland news, of course. Foden 2, with Richarlison 3. De Bruyne is 4th, just because I'm still not certain on the amount of minutes he's going to play. Even if he starts, it's probably only 60 minutes. And although Saka blanked in game week 21, he still is a great captain. They've had a good break from their last game against Crystal Palace. Nottingham Forest have just played in the Cup. So although Saka did blank, he still remains my 5th best captain this week. And the final one is, well, will Liverpool double in game week 25? At time of recording, on Monday evening, we have not had the announcement. You might get the announcement and then this is completely moot. But the double is very likely. The predictions are around 75% plus that they're going to double in game week 25. Of course, that fixture was moved and postponed out of game week 26. Basically, the reason for it is Liverpool are still in all cup competitions. They're still in all their European competitions, which means they only have 3 midweeks left this season where they don't have a game. That is game week 25, game week 34, and game week 37. And they have a minimum of 3 games that they have to postpone. Of course, in game week 26, game week 29, and game week 34, the 3 blank game weeks. So the 3 blank game weeks and 3 midweeks. You surely think the Premier League would put the 3 blank game week fixtures into the 3 midweeks, which is why the sensible thing would be to put it in game week 25. They did a very similar thing with Manchester United last year when they're in the cup, so hopefully they are common sense and do the same this year. It would give them a double of Brentford and Luton. It is almost guaranteed to be announced before game week 23. I think there's a decent chance it gets announced before game week 22. There's no reason for them to wait if they are going to announce it, but it should be done by game week 23. If it's not announced by then, the chances of it happening drop considerably. So just to talk in a little bit more detail about those blanks and doubles and about what it means. So game week 25, we've had guaranteed as a double for Manchester City. It is where we're expecting that Liverpool game to go. Game week 26, of course, the Carabao Cup final. We know that as a blank. We've had games postponed out of there. Then we can start now, after the FA Cup round at the weekend and the FA Cup draw, to start looking at game week 29. Game week 29 is caused by a blank for the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. We've just had the round. There was one more round and then the quarterfinals. So there was a round of FA Cup between game week 26 and game week 27. The teams that progress through that round between game weeks 26 and 27 will blank in game week 29, of course, plus their opponents as well, right? So if Manchester City get through into the next round, then Manchester City versus Brighton will be a blank, no matter whether Brighton is still in the cup. Game week 34 is the round after that. So if you get through game week 29, that round, the quarterfinals, you'll then blank, or you won't necessarily double in game week 34. The game week 34 is a bit of a confusing one. So just to clarify exactly why it's a blank and a double, it's going to be a very small blank and a reasonable size double, maybe 1 or 2 teams blanking. That is because game week 34 actually has a free midweek after it. So although it's the FA Cup at the weekend, there's no matches in the midweek. So those teams that are still in the cup will not play at the weekend, but they might have fixtures rescheduled for the midweek afterwards, which means some teams might play twice because they'll play at the weekend because they're not in the cup and play in the midweek against a team that has to play in that. So there is definitely room for a lot of blanks going into game week 34. And then, of course, game week 37 will be the big double about where the rest of the fixtures this season will go. So there will be a full video out tomorrow morning where I do this in a lot more detail and we'll discuss chip strategies, when best to use free hit, when best to use wildcard, triple captain, bench boost, all of that. But basically, that is the route for the rest of the season. Going into game week 21 was the first opportunity to play your wildcard, and I decided that I thought it was not a good time for you to wildcard, but some of you may have done. Game week 22 is much better, and I personally think this is a wildcard team I'd put together if I was looking to play it this week. Bearing in mind, if you are wildcarding this week, you almost have to free hit in game week 29. The reason for this is those of us using transfers for game week 29 will tear up our teams. We won't have players we want long term in it. And if you do that without a wildcard to sort it out afterwards, you'll be left with the dregs for the rest of the season. So if you're wildcarding any time now, free hit 29 feels almost guaranteed for you. Dubravka, Areola rotate really nicely towards the end of the season. You don't need to worry about them playing in game week 29 because you're going to play your free hit that week. Trent, Walker, Estupiñán, Gabriel with the cheap option of Van Heck in your defence. Jota, Gordon, Palmer, Richarlison, Foden with Alvarez, Tony and Pedro. Looking at the money you have in the bank, you can easily do Alvarez up to Erling Haaland next week, and you even have enough money probably to do Jota up to Salah when he's back, depending on your team value. Now, looking at the blank in game week 26, you are left with Palmer, Richarlison, Jota, and Trent in that one. So you are left with 4 players with a blank. There are plenty of transfers between now and game week 26 when you could maybe sell one of those to get a full 11 out in game week 26. Plus, it has a nice long-term plan with doublers in game week 25, setting up nicely for the rest of the season as well. And finally, just a little review of where I'm at with my team. This is my team still. I haven't confirmed any transfers. I am going to confirm my transfers on my deadline stream this evening. My current plan remains that I will sell Salah. I still think Richarlison is number one, but I do fancy Crystal Palace a little bit. Sheffield United at home, of course, we know Elise is now back for Crystal Palace. So they've got Elise back, they've got Edouard back, and Eze as well. That front three suddenly is back when the nice run of fixtures do start. It is a massive 6-pointer as well for Crystal Palace. If they win this, they probably get rid of all the doubts about potential relegation. But if they lose it, it puts them in real trouble. So I do expect Eze, Elise, Edouard all to start. They do also have a great fixture at home to Burnley in game week 26 as well, which is the blank game week. So I quite fancy Eze and Elise, but I do think Richarlison is the better long-term pick, given I'm not certain if I'm going to free hit in game week 29 or not. So it is really between Richarlison, maybe Bernardo Silva, and Eze. Right now, Richarlison is the favourite, with Eze probably quite close behind. And that is all for today's video. Game week 22 is later today. There will be a 2-hour deadline stream where I answer all of your questions live. If you have any further questions, drop it all in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. 1,000 likes on the videos there, and subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.